All right, I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning or afternoon. Welcome to our second of the partner series. Today, our webinar is with Mike Souza from Janus Displays, and we'll be discussing the rise in digital communication and how guest communication has transformed this past year. Before we get into the webinar, I just want to let everyone know we will be doing a Q&A at the end of the webinar. You can put your answers through the Q&A or the chat box, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. As always, we will send out a recording of the webinar tomorrow morning for you to review, and we'll send it to everyone who's registered as well. So let's kick it over to our panelists. So we have Bob Graham from Event Temple. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you're doing today?
Yeah, sure. So doing great, getting through all this final wave of COVID, hopefully. But yeah, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Event Temple, specialize in hotel sales and catering software. And that includes event management, all the sales tools, so sales prospecting, account management and CRM, all the room blocks and more. And before Event Temple, I worked in sales for quite a while. So I've had experience on the road as well as running the company now of actually doing the sales day to day. After sales, I built and sold a national event company. So that was an event management and music and things like that, which was a neat experience. After a few years of that, I had the great idea, hey, I'm going to teach myself how to code, which I don't necessarily say was the best choice, but through that process, I threw myself in the deep end and I was starting to take some lessons and learning how to do it all. And my partner now was helping me here and there. And he said, Bob, you're probably a lot better at business than software engineering. And it's probably going to take a really long time for you to get good, if ever. But the good news is I am pretty good. So why don't we team up? So that's how Event Temple was born. Started with a friendship, really. And, from there, one of our friends was using legacy technology in her hotel. And she said, you guys are welcome to come and take a look. I really don't like our software. If you can give me something better, I'll buy it. So Event Temple was really started from an interesting approach of just going and sitting with her in her office and just friends having coffee and saying, oh, how do you send a BEO? What's your sales process look like? And her telling us how she wished it was versus what she had. And we really didn't look at other systems at that time. We just built it from the ground up based on what she said. So an interesting approach. And I think it's worked pretty well because today we're in hyper growth mode. For the last 5 years or so, we've been growing every single year by a lot. We have thousands of users in 24 countries today. So yeah, it's a little bit about me and doing well. Excited to talk with you today, Mike.
Awesome. And Mike, over to you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and Janus Displays?
Sure. So I'm the senior product manager at Janus Displays. I've been in that role the majority of my time there, which is 15 years now. So quite a bit of experience in the digital signage market, hospitality industry. But for Janus, Janus has been around since the early 80s. I enjoyed, Graham, Bob, your story on that and how you started. Janus used to sell spectrum analyzers to the military, so Lockheed Martin and some other interesting things. And a friend of the owner of the company who worked at Gaylord Hotels, everybody knows what Gaylord is, said, hey, we're tired of sending our employees around our massive 100-acre properties to put meeting signage outside the rooms. And with a little background in engineering for the owner, decided to try and put together something that would be digital signage. And of course, this is 1984, so very different from what it is now. And it was dot matrix LED signs. We custom built them. We had the printer boards, the PCB boards, and that's how it started. And it was so successful that we created a line called Janus Displays and sold off the spectrum analyzers. We don't do that anymore. And now our focus is quite a few different things: hospitality, convention centers, military, higher education, healthcare, just to kind of mention a few. And we touch all aspects of signage. So targeted content on video walls, interactive screens, wayfinding, meeting space, which is huge for our relationship with Event Temple and showing how to get to meetings. And then, of course, now you've got the ability to provide mapping, directions, amenities on property or off property, monetizing that, news, weather, local events. The possibilities are really endless. And being with Janus for the last 15 years, I've had the privilege of touching almost every major project, every integration we've done, and it's been a fun ride, and it's interesting to see where the industry is going.
Definitely. Well, thank you for being here today. So we'll jump into the webinar. So the COVID-19 crisis, I'm sure we're all sick of hearing about it, but it has forever changed the hospitality industry. So when the crisis first hit, hotels were kind of forced to change how they communicated and had to embrace the digital era of communication. So Mike, how have you seen hotels make this switch and transition from kind of the old way of communicating to their guests to this new digital era?
That's a good question. And it's been interesting to see that. I think some of the biggest things is a transition from using paper signage, which is what a lot of hotels even now still do. And the goal has been minimizing touch points in the hotel because it's more areas to clean. So I'll give you an example. One of the big things, we've all been in a hotel room and we've pulled out the in-room ordering menu and it looks like it's been there for 15 years probably. They used to reuse a lot of that stuff. These menus were only changed when they had information that changed. But with this transition and this new industry with COVID, they can only have single-use touch points. So they were printing menus. I mean, tons of paperwork, then dropping it in. The cleaning staff had to make sure they were put in there. They had to throw away all the old ones. And we came to some of these hotel groups and said, let's transition to something even more digital. And we were pushing content into the guest rooms. So dedicated TV channels, now moving menus for the restaurants to a QR code on the screen or on a display somewhere in the lobby where they could scan that, walk away. And we've noticed this shift has really helped because the amount of time or forgetting to print something or just the money involved in all of that, doing more with less really. These properties don't have IT people on property as much as they used to. And on average, these hotels were spending like a part-time salary, just with them updating this information. So it's a way for them to transition, save money, and then make money on that as well.
Mike, we just created this integration with Janus not too long ago, which was one of the big catalysts for the webinar. And I obviously knew what you did. I thought it was just reader boards really before we started chatting. And just so everyone knows, we talked offline yesterday, and it was like a lot of the conversation was me just going, "Wow, you guys can do that? You can do that?" Because it really extended what we have in Event Temple. I thought, wow, this really makes what we offer way cooler and more interesting because it was touching. And I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit, like the rooms, the menus, the QR. I mean, just some high level things that people might not know that you do that I didn't know.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that they're learning when they shift to digital is now you can start really making revenue on this stuff. So a lot of hotels, based on hotel occupancy, they'll start selling ads for those displays. So they're showing their in-room menus, for their steakhouse that's on property. But if you've got local, restaurants, companies that want to advertise that maybe don't conflict or compete with what you already offer at the hotel from an amenity perspective, they're telling these people, hey, $400 a month, $500 a month, and it doesn't seem like a lot initially, but when you've got 10 or 15 different types of ads and you're catering to these different groups, you're now turning this into a money-making machine. And at the same time, you're helping meet the needs of a guest. A lot of them now are not wanting to leave their room, with COVID. So now you can say in your in-room, hey, call Johnny's Pizza Shop across the street, mention this ad, get 10% off. We'll bring it to your room. It's not a bad ad.
And you were saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember you could also flip on the TV in your room and see, where your event is happening, details about that. So you've kind of got the reader board right on the TV now.
Yeah, and that's what I left out in that first chat. So yeah, the ability to pull like all the events from Event Temple and show them in the room. Mm-hmm. You're doing a couple of things. One, you don't got to leave your room now and maybe go check a reader board that's in the lobby, which is still effective, but why go to a pre-function area? And it also minimizes phone calls. The hotel staff they're pretty slim nowadays. They don't have as many on property as they used to. So to call a front desk or the sales and catering office and just verify something, now you've got all that information there. And with our integration with you guys, you're looking at something that's up to date every minute. So we can be pulling that data live and on the fly, and they know that what they're looking at is accurate, for those meetings.
Very cool.
Very cool. Yeah, I definitely can see the value in it. I was one of those people who had to change the papers behind the screens. Anytime there was one little last edit to a meeting, I was running around like a mad woman in the hotel. So it's nice to know you can just, with a click of a button, update that and not worry that someone's in the wrong room. Bob, how have you seen communication shift from the sales perspective and the events perspective? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so one thing that always surprises me is hotels before COVID were running on a lot of legacy technology, if you can even call it that, because in many places there was no technology. So talking about the sales process, we actually had someone from a hotel in Vancouver come into our office one day, just randomly prospecting call, right? A walk-in. And it's just because the name Event was in our name. And she thought, oh, maybe, this is a good agency or something to work with. And then you see cold calls, but there's been two things that are interesting here. One is I think a lot of hoteliers don't know that now millennials make up a big majority of their B2B buyers. And millennials hate cold calls and they hate drop-ins but they check their phone. I think it's something like 43 times a day. And they're on social media and email all the time. And so what I've seen COVID do is really accelerate this change that, was already happening, but now it's about digital proposals. It's about digital prospecting at scale. And I think the really innovative hotels, they're seeing, wow, it really can save time and become more predictable too, because now you can see what job titles are working, what messaging is working, when should I reach out? You have all this data that before you kind of were relying on, well, maybe they had a really bubbly personality and connected with the right person at the right time when they walked in. That's great, but it's not, and it's important still, but it's not really scalable. And so with COVID, there's no offices open, right? A lot of people have been furloughed, so you try to make that cold call and no one's picking up. So it's been really interesting to see that you don't want to just sit and do nothing, right? So how do you sort of prospect in a way that's a little less salesy and aggressive? And how do you do that digitally? And I think that was already happening, but it was a lot further away. And with COVID now, it's like the only way. So their hotels, especially the ones that are winning that I see, they're really embracing this change.
Definitely. Let's pivot a bit and talk about the integration. So this is a relatively new integration that we've built with Janus Displays. Obviously, the partnership makes a lot of sense just based on what we both offer hotels and the hotel guest experience. Bob, can you tell us a little bit about the integration and just kind of how it works?
Yeah, so as I alluded to earlier, when we reached out, we were originally looking at just reader boards. So we would have a lot of properties, larger properties, especially saying, hey, do you integrate with Janus? We need a reader board solution, and Janus is a well-known name. So sure, let's connect with them. But since building the integration, I'm really excited about all the other opportunities of, like Mike was saying, how do you put menus at the forefront? How do you enhance the guest experience by just connecting to some of the other Janus offerings? Like you have local restaurants that they can order from. That's amazing. People want change and variety. Now they've got one less reason to leave your property, especially during COVID. The in-room TV, I mean, it's been amazing because I felt like this integration basically took what Event Temple offers, which is the full sales and catering suite, and now extended it into multiple touch points in real life in the hotel. It's not just behind the screen. So, storing information prior to the event, and then that data is pushing to display, but it's pushing to a bunch of different places. So yeah, Mike, you do a better job of describing what some of those pieces are aside from me, but it was really cool.
No, I was kind of blown away with seeing your software, how it worked. And, we discussed this offline yesterday, but just how, if it's not easy to use, if it's not something that gets them from initial click to processing those orders and getting those things handled, they're not going to use it. It's not going to be something that they're going to, utilize to the fullest extent. And that's the way Janus has kind of been. It's all about making it as easy as possible. Removing as many touch points is one thing with regards to COVID, but removing as many steps, for the hotels. With less staff, they need that. So for the event displays, they're utilizing already an easy to use software in Event Temple and putting their information in. That's where they stop. We've already got the interface behind the scenes that's automated, so they don't need to go in and enter the information again or go in and verify. They schedule the event template out and they send it to the screens, and our software is intelligent enough to know, hey, Event Temple's passing meetings to us. There's obviously meetings going on right now. Mm-hmm. We segment them. The software knows how to send it to the proper displays. And then when the meetings stop, maybe it's a lunch break or just it's 5:00 and the meetings are over. Instead of showing blank events, we now say, oh, there's no events. Now we kick back to what you mentioned, ads, restaurants, and all that kind of stuff. The other aspect of it is when you've got large facilities, you can be standing in the lobby and looking at a directory and saying, okay, there's my meeting. Mm-hmm. How do I get there? That was the issue with a lot of these bigger properties we've worked with. So you can have directional arrows. We do little icons next to the meeting with the elevator with a number 2. So, I got to get to the second floor. All of these things, or even a dynamic map on the screen with a little "you are here" and it's got a little breadcrumb trail.
Mm-hmm.
All of these to kind of get them to that meeting in the correct room at the right time. So that way they can, benefit from that and then let the staff do their job otherwise.
You had some other cool things you were talking about. Maybe we can get into a bit deeper around your app and how the links work yesterday with the mobile version.
Oh yeah, the same thing. So something I failed to mention yesterday just in our chat was how important the QR code is, not only for the guests, but for the employees. So I'll explain. So first off, everybody always asks, right? The first thing, do you have an app? And it's great if you have one. But we've just seen that in the industry a lot of times when you push the guest to go to some app store to download an app, to enter their email, to create an account, 40, 60, 90 seconds in, they kind of just give up and then they'll just ask somebody, the first employee that walks by, hey, where's ballroom A? That's it. But with our app, it's a QR code that's HTML5 based. So it launches in the browser natively on their device, iPad, Android phone, whatever it is. And they have everything that they're utilizing our system for. So of course the events from Event Temple. Of course they've got a property map, a static map sitting there so they can kind of see the layout. But then if they've got flight stats, if they've got weather, if they've got anything else, it's all available there. Wow. So that's great. Scan it, walk away, right? But here's what's really interesting. So how is it that the hotel can offer better customer service? Well, these hotels can save that same link, that QR code, on their iPads. I mean, how many times have you seen that a sales and catering manager, they're always walking around with an iPad? Mm-hmm. Well, now they've got that saved. So if there's not a board nearby and a guest walks up and says, hey, is my flight on time? Or I'm just running out of my meeting, where's my next one? They don't have to walk them over to a screen. They've got it all on their mobile device as well. So you can now offer even better customer service at the same time.
Yeah, it's huge for being in the know and just giving that prompt response. It makes you look like you know what you're doing, right? As opposed to, and it's funny because simple questions like that could probably throw you, right? Like, hey, I'm with this group. Where's my meeting? What's the weather out today? Where would you recommend for lunch? All those sorts of little things we take for granted. You've got to know that on property, and pretty fast or you look like you don't care. So that's really cool.
Everybody's a mobile concierge now pretty much with that.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And there's nothing worse than being caught like on the 3rd floor of a hotel and have to run down being to the desktop to go double check something. You just kind of, you look crazy. The other thing I loved that you talked about yesterday was on QR codes and how people are using them to communicate with the events team. Do you mind touching a bit on that, Mike?
Yeah, so the QR codes can be used in a lot of different ways. They're very dynamic by nature. So we've had some customers that wanted a way on the outside. We do 10-inch to 22-inch displays outside of the event room, the boardroom, and it's going to have the event listed on there, maybe the current one and the next one. But maybe there's 10 chairs missing. There was a mistake, or silverware is not there, or something along those lines. Whether it's inside the room or at the screen, you can scan a QR code, and we can embed QR codes with dynamic data that launches the native default email app on your mobile device. It already plugs in the contact events at the hotel name or whatever their contact email is, and even put something in the signature, not the signature line, but the subject line saying which room you scanned it on, and you can send a message really quick saying, hey, we need a couple more tables, or we're missing this, and then hit send and walk away. And if they're a lot of these hotels are monitoring those things, and they can get that information without even leaving the room or even placing a phone call.
Yeah, and that's such a cool way for hotels to be able to do more with less. Right now, we know a lot of hotels that have had to furlough their employees or have staff working from home. So being able to leverage technology in that way is such an asset, especially right now.
Yeah, especially.
Yeah, and when we're talking about that, we're also starting to see employees have to adapt technology that might not have been in their job description before. So front desk employees might have to be working in a CRM or having to update a display. How are you handling the training with that? I'd love to hear from both of you.
Sure. I can kick us off, Mike. So, one of the things that we've definitely noticed is compared to legacy competitors, we've got a big leg up on training. And I think it's because with a lot of the software infrastructure, the new code we're using behind the scenes. When you build modern software, you use modern code architecture, and that software allows you to do some pretty interesting things. So one thing we can look at is how many clicks does this take someone to do an action? And we can't see the specific person, but we see trends in the app. And so we can use a data-driven approach to making it easier. And then we also spend time interviewing customers just to find that kind of thing out. Hey, what do you love about Event Temple? What would you like to change if you had a magic wand? And I think, we've only been around for 5.5 years. And in that time, we've grown significantly. But I think we've also created one of the easier to use programs out there. We say, if you join us on an hour Zoom screencast, you should know everything you need to do to do your job. And if you join us on a second hour, you should know all the advanced settings. And you don't really need to do either to use it. You should be able to log in and figure it out intuitively, but that's to really be an expert. And you contrast that to the old days where, I'm still seeing quotes from competitors go out that say, hey, we need you for 2 or 3 days on site and it's mandatory, or multiple hours of training. And I think it's just wild because right now you might not have all that. You just have someone that's like, hey, you're the GM, the DOS, it had to be furloughed, it's COVID. So you're the new salesperson now too. Welcome. They have about 10 minutes to figure out the basics, and they're probably pretty stressed out to go through that process. So in Event Temple, we wanted to make it really easy to hit the chat button. Someone's there, you can ask a question. Okay, cool, I'm back. But also just to make it just work and make sense, and not to have costs around that, right? So we're not going to send you a bill every time someone hops on the phone with us or, wants to learn how to use the system. And then also some of the other new tech out there we've leveraged, like online university training, where you can actually take a course in about an hour and self-paced watch the videos 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and it shows you when you're done, hey, you're certified, this is all complete. So I think that's a big piece of just thinking about and prioritize making it easier every day. And it just goes to show, like, I think there's a lot of companies that traditionally didn't do that and haven't really kept up, because software has changed a lot. That data really helps, make the user experience easier if you pay attention to it. So also, I look at like 2 or 3 years from now, if it's already improved so much since we started, how much better is it going to keep getting, right? Because we update this thing every day. We make it easier to use every day. So those are some of the things that we've done here. How has training been for you, Mike, with Janus?
It's been something that we've always done, and I don't think it was ever more important than now, to your point. And one of the things that blew me away was I love the analytics you had mentioned on knowing how many clicks and points it takes to get someone from logging into the software to printing out an invoice, and sending that. And that's incredible. Janus has done some unique things. We like to say that our software developers are the best. I mean, they are, but it's really more that we get so much feedback from the industry. I mean, they'll tell us your software is fantastic, but if you could do this, it'd be great. We know it's not just going to benefit them. It's going to benefit probably everybody in the hospitality industry, and maybe even it'll trickle into other industries, healthcare and so forth. So what we've done always with our solutions and all of our contracts with our customers is ongoing training is free. So if you want to call us, you mentioned it already, man, these ones are furloughed, they're coming back. Sometimes they just want a refresher. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you've got a GM who's never even been in the software before. So he's calling us and saying, I need a login. I can't even get in because he's never done it. And then he learned how to use it. And we've got techs available. We don't outsource that. There's no call center. They're going to get a Janus tech, and we're going to help them out through that.
Yeah.
And to the software, I think the layout and how we've done it, software really is the shining light. If it's not easy to use, they're not going to use it. Our layout, and what do they say? Theft is the greatest form of flattery. Mm-hmm. We imitated and mimicked an office layout. When you jump inside our software, it's very familiar to the eyes. Mm-hmm. People start clicking around thinking they've used it before, and it lessens that learning curve, just like you touched on. And we've seen a huge benefit in that with ones that are coming back. They don't need 6 hours of training. We'll give them a quick 30 minutes just so they can get their job accomplished at that moment and get those events out. And they might call us back later for a couple tweaks, but they can use the system right away. And it's not the case in the industry. I know other software platforms that do what we do. They lean more towards like the Adobe Illustrator and the ones who have really high experience with that, where you have to type in the X and Y coordinates and the exact pixels and where you want this content on the screen. Ours is drag and drop, and you don't require that back end knowledge. You can do it. We have that available too, but you got to make it easy. And that was, exemplified in what you said.
Well, let's talk about money. So let's talk about the ROI on investing in digital communication. So I loved when you were talking about how yesterday you've measured that one person walking around changing signs has equated to a part-time salary, which is wild to think about. What are some of the other ways that you can get ROI through digital communication?
So for ROI, the number one thing that a hotel really wants to do is keep dollars in house, right? So you're promoting those drink specials by the pool, maybe not now where you're at since it's like 10 degrees outside, but in normal instances, or just driving traffic in the property. You want to promote more things at one restaurant, get people there. You can do that, dinner specials and whatnot. So now you can use our signs. They don't just have to show events on a full screen. We have really unique templates, and you can have events on one side, ads running in a corner, an RSS feed in the bottom, and then weather. And all of this can be coexisting together. And they're noticing dollars in house increasing, instead of sending them out. But then when you have things, and I think, Sammy, this is kind of what you were touching on, even if they don't compete with the property, work with them. That concierge, you're recommending things in the area to do, but you've been doing it for free probably for a long time. Get a partnership there. Now it's not just word of mouth. You're putting ads on these displays, and those impressions make a difference. And I think the really unique thing is when we're pulling those events, Bob, and showing them on the screens, there's nothing worse than a screen that has nothing on it, and for us, that AI that we have in our software and the analytics, when we see that those events are dropping off or they've expired, it switches content automatically. That that GM doesn't have to jump back in the software and change it and say, I need to put ads up. It kicks out and starts showing those ads that you wanted. So there's a lot of ways to really turn into a revenue stream. And then you're also saving the few employees that are on properties time and letting them accomplish their job even better.
Mm-hmm. And these revenue opportunities, they all add up, right? Like we even said yesterday, hey, it could be $400 a month for an ad, but all of a sudden you get a few. And, during COVID, you start to notice those things pretty quickly, because if occupancy is going down and that revenue is coming in, well, it's better to have it than not to have it, right? And the cost to get it is very low comparatively to building a hotel, right? You've already put in the investment, and you've had all these costs. Why not leverage them every way you can in a way that adds value to the guest, which I thought was very cool. The other thing I wanted to touch on that we were chatting about a little bit before is I had asked you about legacy competitors for sales and catering, because I know you work for or work with some through the integration too, and definitely don't want to name any names or anything like that. But curious, because you mentioned some higher costs to get set up and then maintenance fees. Can you say a little bit about that, what it's been like with other providers versus the experience with Event Temple? Because I think there's some chance there to provide some ROI as well.
Yeah, so if you're saving money, that's ROI already, right? You're not spending as much. I think what we've noticed is you've got a few providers that, call it what it is. The 800-pound gorillas, I think, is a term I like to use, that have maybe bought up a few other maybe smaller companies, and now they get maybe a bulk of this business, but they also let their pricing structure reflect that. So now we've seen $4,000 to $5,000 just to turn on an integration. They've already got their software, they've already got their service, they're already using their system to store all of their events, and just to export that really in an interface for us to read from it, they want this upfront cost. And I think the thing that I was impressed, Bob, was because what we've noticed is timing. The other thing too, sometimes they'll say, oh, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks to get you guys we call them property tokens, so we can pull that information for that property. But the software's already it's already there. So sometimes, we see that the prices are kind of high. They add a recurring fee on top of that just to support the interface, which generally we end up getting the calls and we end up doing most of that work, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we've noticed that the cost can be pretty high. And I think for what you're getting for it, sometimes you really got to weigh out, is it worth it? What could you get somewhere else like Event Temple?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people on the other side, so on the hotel side, they don't really understand that when you have an integration between two companies like ours, it's a partnership, and just like any relationship, there's going to be different levels, right? So saying you have an integration is one thing, but if you charge a competitor charges Janus to build the integration, and then they charge every time the customer wants to activate it, and then they charge monthly fees, and then support is slow, and then the API doesn't get updated, and it takes 2 weeks to activate a new hotel. That's very different than me being able to call you, Mike, and saying, hey, I've got a hotel, really important customer to me. Can you take care of them? Yeah, sure, Bob, I've got it. It's just, I really wish there was like a certification process of like, how close a partnership do you actually have? Because, and I guess that's why we do these webinars, because it makes a big difference. And then also I feel like with a company that's a little smaller like ours, I can't speak to yours because I know you guys are a little bit bigger, but even from what I've seen from your team so far, is the culture fit and getting to know each other has been huge, and aligning right on values and little things like how the customer should be treated. And like you said, you don't outsource support. You don't have 50,000 employees. So we can get to know your people can get to know ours. Those little things add up. And I think hoteliers just should be aware of how much it can benefit them, because they can get involved in that partnership and say, hey, we'd like to see this, we'd like to see that. Can you help us here? And if you're working with two open-minded companies, they'll both say, of course, like, we get it. And COVID has been a good time to have that be tested, right? Hey, can you guys delay this bill a little bit, or help us here make sense of this subscription? Because we used to have 10 people, now we have one. And I'm sure just getting to know you guys, you would work with them however you can, same as us. But some of the big companies, they're like tough, right? Too bad.
Well, they're too big, and I think the way we started things off when we first started this conversation way back and on, hey, let's let our developers talk, so they were talking together and saying, oh, you need that, I need this, that works great. So, it's going to happen. We're going to get a phone call and they're going to say, hey, the events aren't showing up. It's there's something wrong with your signage. Maybe there's a glitch, obviously things happen. But at the same time, if it's on even the Event Temple side, or they didn't do something correctly, because we've had that cohesion, we have that open, I don't know, that open forum. I can't think of the word to use. And it's very easy to reach out and say, hey, Bob, we've got this is unique. Why is this happening? We're put in a queue for a lot of these other companies, and they're like, well, we'll get back to you. That doesn't look well. The hospitality industry is what it is. They give out so much hospitality and they're on top of things. It's no wonder why they expect that back, and they deserve it for what they do. And that's what we try to give them. And I think you do as well.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because we're at a point in time now with technology where, the technology is so strong and these engineers are so good. You don't need 1,000 people to build these products anymore. You can start with a small team like Event Temple has, and get thousands of users around the world, have the system work, get #1 reviews, connect to other programs fast, and you can do it for a lower price. And you're actually not losing anything. You're gaining new functionality that didn't exist before. So, and then with the integrations too, I think it's not going to be a static integration where we go there, we're connected, leave it. If Janus releases a really cool new product that you haven't even thought about yet, and you let us know, and it's got an API endpoint on it, we're going to see how we can connect it to add value.
Yep.
And we're going to let everyone know that's using our system, hey, this really new cool thing came out, give it a try, it's ready to go for you. And they'll go, how much is it? You know what? No, there's no cost. Just log in and try it. For the integration piece anyway, right? So I think that's the vision for the future that I get excited about. And, when we have partners, we try to pick just one or a couple in every different area of the industry. And we go really narrow and deep and build the relationship. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that we've been able to do that with you guys, and it's been great so far.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
That's been awesome. All right, so we'll jump into the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put them into the Q&A box or the chat box. I'll be monitoring it. While we wait, because it usually takes a couple minutes for them to flow in, I'd love to hear from each of you. What's the most innovative hotel initiative that you've seen during this crisis? So Mike, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting. You've got, obviously we know that a lot of hotels have been struggling with single digit occupancy, right? And how do we get people staying in the hotel? Well, a lot of people are not staying in hotels overnight. Well, can we get them to use it during the day? And one of the things that I saw, a couple ads were sent to me that they're renting the rooms out for remote workers. Good buddy of mine, the company he works for, they're getting rid of all of their office space. He's working out of the house. He calls me sometimes and says he's tired of the same four walls, but you sit here and you pay, and I thought the cost was pretty aggressive for what it was. You get your own private room, dedicated internet, and then you get all these deals where you can have, breakfast included, and you get coffee and your own coffee and all this kind of stuff. You get a couple people doing that regularly. Or even the other thing that they mentioned was, well, hey, while you're here, if you're trying to meet somebody in a safe environment, during COVID, for a little extra, you can use one of our boardrooms. So now you've got your own meeting space. I thought it was really unique that they were doing that to try and get people in rooms that otherwise would have been empty.
Yeah, that is neat. I'm just waiting for hotels to turn into private member clubs. Me and Mike were talking about this, where you can pay a monthly subscription to a luxury hotel and get, you can have your meetings by the swimming pool or with a glass of wine. But I haven't seen that one yet. But I did see so mine, Sammy, would be Citizen M. I thought what they were doing was very cool. So they moved to a pure subscription model. So what you could do, and it was for individual business travelers, you could basically book this subscription package. And I believe it was an annual commitment. It may have been month to month, but you paid monthly. And for that, you got a few room nights. You've got a few things Mike mentioned, like perks, like, coffees and meals included. But if you're traveling on the road, you could buy this package and it would apply to any property. And I just thought, wow, if you could get people to advance pay for that, it's a great way to protect revenue and bring some money in now when you need it the most, but offer them a pretty valuable perk. It's almost like a mix of a loyalty program, but saying, hey, let's start right now. And it was funny because it was so innovative, but really what it broke down to was like a 1-page PDF of like, here's what you get, sign up here. And it's funny, I think just rethinking how they did business was probably pretty quick to execute, but really compelling and new in the business model. And I also say, if this thing works, I mean, what business would you rather own? One that's very sporadic and you're crossing your fingers, you get some bookings in, or one where you have predictable business? And yeah, we do L&R contracts and stuff like that, but this takes it to a whole other level, right? So I thought that was pretty neat.
No, I thought that software as a service model, but for a room was interesting. The other thing I thought of too is all these other services that do it similarly for other things, like Uber. You can pay like a set fee and you get X amount of rides a month, but for a discounted price, and a few other companies, even for food delivery. Look at how big that's gotten during COVID. You want your favorite restaurant. Postmates, I think, has like, the same thing where you pay a certain amount and you get your unlimited deliveries. You don't pay delivery fees anymore. So I think that's a interesting point. I think it's a transition that's going to happen a lot more.
Definitely. Bob, I had a question for you about prospecting. So what is the best way for people to reach out right now during COVID if they're prospecting for new business, and kind of what should they expect for the sales cycle for that?
Yeah, so I think the philosophy on what is a qualified lead needs to change a little bit through COVID. So in the past, it wasn't really a lead in your mind as a salesperson unless they gave you the dates, right? So, okay, do you use room nights? When? I don't know, maybe in the summer. And then they would just leave it, right? Specifically, if the room nights weren't coming up quickly, most hoteliers wouldn't work the lead. So I think the mindset needs to shift, because most of your business, unfortunately, is going to be in the future. But what if you could nurture those prospects in a scalable way, right? So how do you reach out as a resource? And I think Mike's given some pretty good hints on that today, right? Like, just make yourself different. I love the idea of a hotel as a community resource or a regional resource, because for the traveler, that's what it is, right? If you put me in a foreign country and you say, hey, Bob, have fun, and I don't know what to do, the first thing I'm going to do is look for my hotel. And I might spend my first half of the day there just to kind of get comfortable, right? And I would ask them, where should I go? What's safe? What do I check out? I think that's the case anywhere in the world you go, even for a business traveler in a country like the USA. You still don't know the area maybe, and you're looking for that. So I think being a resource by producing content around that is really important. Thinking about how you can be different, thinking about your safety procedures. But I also think, don't be afraid to reach out, just change the message. So don't send someone a LinkedIn and say, hey, you want to stay at our hotel? Probably doesn't work. But instead, you could go through your CRM, look at past job titles of who have stayed there, or your PMS if you don't have a CRM. And you can say, okay, these are the types of targets by market segment that have historically worked. Let's connect with them on LinkedIn. Let's get their email address using a tool like hunter.io. Let's get that information and let's make contact. Okay, we've made contact. Let's build a relationship. How do we nurture them? And the interesting thing is, in the old way, you'd go push your message on your customer. Now it's more conversational. Now you can ask the customer, hey, I'm curious, when do you see COVID ending? Are you traveling for work right now? Great opener, right? And then you can see from there what they need, what they're caring about. And then you just create content around that. So it's really about asking first, connecting, leaving out, any hesitation or goal, and then using that knowledge that you learn to create messaging to come back even stronger.
I love Hunter.io, by the way. I use it all the time.
It's awesome. Yeah.
It's a great tool.
They're like, how'd you know my email?
Not sponsored.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so let's jump into final thoughts. So Mike, I'd love to hear, what do you see for the hospitality in the next 2 years? What's some bold predictions coming from you and Janus Signs?
I think digitizing properties is going to be the biggest move. It's already been happening. Janus, we are a brand standard in a lot of major hotel chains. And if a hotel is going through a renovation or a property improvement plan, or PIP as it's well known, in order to keep that brand, a lot of times inside of that spec is you got to have signage. So that's already going to start happening. And I think a lot of hotels are saying, hey, no one's staying here. The hotel's empty. Let's have the renovation now. Normally you're trying to fight to do a renovation in between 80% occupancy, which is tough. So I think that's going to come along the line where we're seeing more renovations and property improvement plans. The other thing we're noticing too, and Bob, you'd mentioned this yesterday, and I thought, man, that's so true, is there's more competition now. So I hate to steal a little bit of the thunder. I know you'll go into a little more, but we're seeing that the competition is getting to the point where they're trying to go to these hotels that have maybe their spaces booked even during the pandemic, find out who it is. And I think we've all been guilty of maybe, eavesdropping on our competition. That's all right. But a lot of times we were told that they would go in and take pictures of the paper signage to see what group was there. If it's digital signage, they'll take it. We talked about QR codes early on, and it's a great feature to have for digital signage, the way our app launches right in the browser. But we've actually had a lot of customers of ours ask for expiring QR codes. They don't want someone to come into the hotel, scan something, and be able to just hit refresh back at their home office, and every day be able to see what groups are there so they can go out and try and, scope their groups out and take them. So we instituted that as a software feature. Thought it was a great idea. And now when those things expire, at least you're making them go back to the hotel again. So maybe they'll have a coffee while they're there and give you some revenue. But that's kind of big. And I think travel is just going to explode. I don't know exactly when because of the timeline of the pandemic, but I think everybody's going to take 2-week vacations at the same time. I think it's going to be crazy.
Mm-hmm. There'll be some crazy parties in Vegas and all around. So for me, Sammy, I think, what Mike was saying about proactive selling and a more competitive environment, right? So there's not going to be as much demand at first. So hotels will have to compete over what business there is. And I think it will be really telling what strategies and tactics are most effective in competing. So like I said, I think there will be a lot of hotels winning through digital prospecting, and probably some pretty clear winners and losers in that really competitive battle. And I think that'll be the first part after COVID is over, or as COVID winds down, right? The first travelers coming back on the road for business, everyone's going to want those. The other piece is, so Bill Gates said 50% of business travel is going to go away. I completely disagree with that. I'm with Mike. I think everyone's going to go crazy. And, nothing against Zoom, but sitting on it all day has shown me how much I value sitting with someone, shaking their hand. I mean, I think we're all going to be thinking about business lunches with way more gratitude than ever before, right? Like, oh my gosh, I get to go to a trade show. This is amazing. Whereas before it was like, oh, I got to go spend 3 days. I don't know. And I think it's going to be like that for a really long time. We're not going to forget in a year this experience, right? It's a once in a lifetime thing that's happened. So I think the travel is going to explode on the business side too. And then with the big brands, I mean, I think they're going to have to think differently. In the past, it's kind of you bought that flag, you paid for it, and everything was good. Set it and forget it. Now a lot of there's been lawsuits with the brands. There's been bankrupt branded properties, all kinds of stuff. I think they'll still be an important part, but they're going to have to rethink how they go about things and be a lot friendlier to the owners, management groups. They're going to have to rethink their strategy in terms of cannibalizing the markets they're in. You know, you can't maybe put 4 of the same branded hotels in location of each other and just slightly tweak the name. So I think it's going to be interesting, and there will be a lot of change, and maybe even some new brand leaders, and some new groups emerging. Like, so for one example is Oyo, right? We'll see how they do, but Oyo has certainly grown as a hotel brand very, very quick. And now they're coming into the UK and the United States. So I think there's going to be a bit of a shakeup.
I think I agree with you on the boutique market. I think a lot of shift is going towards something more unique and not vanilla, as a lot of brands have done. And one thing that I've been picking up on too is a lot of properties are changing hands from management companies. So maybe they're really down a lot of properties in areas and they're letting them go for, 50, 60 cents on the dollar, and they're selling these properties to other management companies. They're picking them up and then they're changing brands overnight. We've had a few that have done that with us where, they had 5 or 6 customers utilizing our software, and they're saying December 1st is our switchover. We got to change all the branding. So we got to do new templates and everything because they're switching hands. It'll be interesting to see how that works and what they do with them when it changes management groups. But there's going to be a lot of moving around.
It's an exciting time, and I can't wait for COVID to be over. Like, I'm sure everyone on the webinar feels as well.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Bob, for being here today. I thought that was a really great conversation around digital communication, the integration, and just kind of the hospitality industry as a whole. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar tomorrow. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me or respond to that email, and I'm happy to connect you to either Mike or Bob, or answer it yourself. So thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you again, Mike. It was nice to have you.
Thank you. Be safe and stay well. All your fans.
Good catching up, Mike. Thanks again.
You as well. Take care.